let's just start with, what is borderline personality disorder?
So let me just give you a little story that I started working in a psychiatric hospital in 1984, 85. And at the time, there were these admission sheets. And on the admission sheet, you'd put the primary diagnosis, mood disorder, bipolar depression. On the second line, you'd put the personality disorder if you could make that diagnosis. And it's called the Axis 2 diagnosis back in the day. And I noticed when I got there were all sorts of dependent and obsessive compulsive and paranoid and this and that, and then some narcissism and other things in there. By about 1988, 89, I noticed it became predominantly the cluster B personality disorders. And cluster B are the narcissistic disorders. Borderline,
cluster
sociopath.
B, he's a cluster B'er.
Cluster B, which is borderline, sociopath, narcissist, and histrionic. And then we talked a little earlier about psychopath versus sociopath. They're very much related. So those four make up the cluster B. And by about 1992, I noticed it was only cluster B. That was every patient that came in the hospital. Now, for a while, the psychiatric literature was wondering, are we overdiagnosing? What do we do? Why is this happening? In my opinion, it happened because we really went through a pandemic of childhood abuse and destroyed families and abandonment, neglect and physical abuse and sexual abuse. And all the patients I was seeing had this history in the background. And it is thought of as a common injury that results in these personality disorders. And with borderline, it affects predominantly women, though not exclusively. And the hallmarks are an unstable self-concept, as I said, unregulated hostility, difficulty managing relationships, preoccupation with abandonment to the point where they push other people away. If they try to get close, they make the abandonment happen. And a lot of suicidality and self-destructiveness and drug use. And one of the really key features that I think Amber Heard and Johnny Depp did us a public service by showing publicly how messy these things are and how distorted people's perceptions can be. Johnny, because he was loaded and out of his mind and maybe in a blackout, but Amber, because she has this disorder. You asked me, let me just talk about the distortions. I can't tell you how many times I would always go in a room with another female nurse or whatever, because very frequently, if I went in the room with a borderline patient, we'd have a nice encounter. I'd get her history, do an exam, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary for me. I would leave, and the patient would report he was abusive. He touched me inappropriately. And they're not lying. They're not lying. They distort because they were so. One of the theories is they're so badly victimized at one time that they literally distort. And then when you have that distortion and then put memory on top of it, and memory is a very seriously flawed instrument in our brain, you get really significant distortions of the truth. And I think that was on display with Amber. It wasn't not a lot of made of that, but her perception of what people accused her of lying. I don't think she was lying. I think that was her perception of what happened.
Wow. That's an interesting legal question, I have to tell you, because if she's not lying, if she actually believes it in her head, given the actual malice standard you have to prove under New York Times versus Sullivan, he might not have had her on defamation if she was truly deluded.
Well, it's not a delusion, it's a distortion. And let me just tell you that one of the things I noticed, and you might be interested in this from a legal perspective, when back in the 90s, all through the 90s, when a borderline would come into the hospital, she would have a minimum of 20 lawsuits under her belt. The legal system was used in the name of this pathology, and all the SLAPP and anti-SLAPP laws were really created in response to these what were called frivolous lawsuits. But to the patient, they weren't frivolous. They actually believed these things happened. The legal system completely fell for it. The problem is now the legal system has adjusted a bit, but some of these same problems are now out in the legislature and other areas.
I got confused. You're saying a borderline personality will have filed 20 lawsuits or will have been the subject of, the defendant in?
Filed.
Okay. Vexatious litigant.
Yeah. Oh, the legal system was caught on to what was going on, but they were being used as an instrument in their psychopathology. It was really disturbing at the time because a lot of people were harmed by it.
Well, if you look at somebody like Amber Heard, I'm not asking you to diagnose her. We already had testimony from somebody who ddid, interview her, though she says not for long enough, and whatever it was, 12 to 18 hours, who says she is one. Her expert said no. Could you have a borderline personality with as much commercial success in their life as she's had?
There's lots of them out there. I see them all the time. Just like we talked about the pro-social psychopaths out there. People can adjust and their personality. And by the way, you can have traits and not technically, if you have a true disorder, it should at least affect your functioning interpersonally or professionally or physically, like your health is suffering. And usually all those areas are affected, but you could have traits that are really intense, but not actually affect your functioning. As it pertains to her diagnosis, she wasn't just interviewed, as I understand. Now, I wasn't there and I don't know the instruments she used. The psychiatrist that interviewed her testified on the stand that she used specific neuropsychiatric instruments that are really just these Scantron test sheets, and they give you the diagnosis. There really is not a lot of debate about, whether those things, that is sort of the gold standard. And she was not just borderline, she had borderline traits and histrionic traits, both. And that's a pretty rough combination. That is rough.
So, question both ways, because I know every woman I know who's single is worried about hooking up with a sociopath, like somebody who has no empathy. Forget psychopath, that's obvious. But like a sociopath, who's just like dead inside, has no empathy and doesn't care about feelings, but knows how to fake it. That's one. But on the other end, now every man I know is worried about hooking up with an Amber Heard.
Right.
There's that meme online, like after the trial, where like, "Hey, fellas, she's available," and it's like, "No, thank you." Well, so what do you tell people on that?
There's a bunch of things I want to say about that. One is let's not disparage people with borderline disorder or borderline traits. Nobody suffers more. Wait,
empathy for them. It's just I don't want to marry one.
I get that, but I just want to put it out there that nobody suffers more than the borderline, him or herself. They suffer a lot, and they use something called projective identification, where they push their pain out into other people. That's why they're so difficult to be around. But I actually did very well with borderlines. I do well with them when I'm out in practice with them, because I just feel deep empathy for them. I know they're in a lot of pain, and you just got to contain them, and you have to know what you're dealing with. But if you're in a romantic relationship with them, it's rough. Here's another piece of advice. If you have borderline personality traits, you are going to tend to attract and be attracted to sociopaths. So, and if you're a sociopath, you're going to be interested in and you're going to attract borderlines. When we run a drug unit, those were the two personality diagnoses we had to immediately separate, because they would end up in some sort of inappropriate contact. And there are things in our personality landscape that determine what we're attracted to. And that's one you could pretty much take to the bank.
So
the borderlines and the sociopaths go together.
If you're like me, you're growing more and more concerned about the future. The market is all over the place, and inflation is at its highest level in 40 years. Interest rates are skyrocketing. Market experts not only predict a recession, but they're using terms like economic hurricane and unprecedented. If you want to protect your future, call a precious metal dealer I trust, American Hartford Gold. They can show you how to protect your savings and retirement accounts by diversifying your portfolio with physical gold and silver. All it takes to get started is a short phone call, and they will have physical gold and silver delivered right to your door or inside your IRA or 401k. And they keep it simple. They are the highest rated firm in the country with an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau and thousands of satisfied clients. And as an exclusive offer for my fans, if you call them right now, they're going to give you up to $1,500 of free silver and a free safe on qualifying orders. So don't wait. Call them now. Call 866-518-2955. That's 866-518-2955. Or text my name, Megyn, to 65532. Again, that's 866-518-2955, or text Megyn to 65532. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.